Hello friends, Heidi here from Rain Country. God is good all the time. And I have a lot of snow peas coming in, and it's time to start preserving them because I'm getting more coming in that I can use on a daily basis. So typically my favorite way to use snow peas is fresh, and that would be in salads and then cooking up right away in something like a stir fry, whether it be a stir fried rice or with noodles or something like that. However, my favorite way now to preserve my snow peas is to dehydrate them. It used to be I like to freeze them, and that is still a great way to do it, especially if you want to use them in stir fries throughout the year. But I really try to avoid using plastic anymore as much as I can to preserve my foods in. And I'm tired of the food savers having to replace them every 2 years. Right at the end of last year, after I did all my packaging up of the things I wanted to freeze, my food saver died. And yet again, and we've been through several of them, several different models, types. I'm just done with them. And so if you have a good running food saver, that's one way to do it, and I'll show you what the package looks like. So these are from last year. These ones sealed up great, didn't have any problems with them, so I have a bunch of these in the freezer from last year. So another reason I will not be freezing any this year. But anyway, this is a really great method, and you do not need to blanch them. I found they turn out better if you do not blanch them when you go to freeze them. Same thing with beans, but that's going to be entirely up to you. Try it both ways and see what you think. Try a batch where you blanch some just a little bit at a time and freeze them, and with the beans and the peas both, and then try one bag of just cutting it up and putting it straight in the bag and freezing it, and then after it's fully frozen, take each bag out and try and see what you think. I found blanching, even when you do it as precise as possible and then throwing immediately in ice water and then freezing it, it made the peas turn out mushy, and I noticed no difference in the beans one way or the other. So I just don't bother. It's just another extra step that's not needed. And I found when it comes to dehydrating, the same thing. So I do not blanch the beans or the peas before I dehydrate them. So I'm going to bring you over here, and I'm going to show you both what I have left of my snow peas that I dehydrated from last year and the green beans. So right here are the last. I was sure I had one more jar, but I used up a lot more than I thought. Here are the peas. Listen to this. And I haven't even kept this sealed. Once I open a jar to use it, I just use it, and I don't seal it in between every use. And yet sitting there for quite some time, listen, still crunchy and good. And I like to eat these right out of the jar. They're like just a tasty snack. And here's an idea that I would like to try. I'm going to probably try this year, is take some of them and lightly coat them in just a little bit of a heat stable oil, such as refined coconut oil or avocado oil. And then just sprinkle very lightly a little bit of salt over them. I think that would make a really tasty snack that would make a healthy replacement for chips. So I've done that with zucchini before. I've done that with kale before, and those, a lot of you have heard of kale chips. Try that with your snow peas. I think that would be really tasty, because just like this, without the little bit of oil and salt, the oil would be mostly to get the salt to stick to it. I think they're really good right out of the jar. So anyway, I'll show you how I cut them up and dehydrate them. And then here's the beans. These ones aren't quite as crispy, but that's just the way the beans are, but they're still very hard. Again, this is a jar I opened not too long ago. Working through them. I typically like to add my dehydrated stuff directly to soups and stuff. So the beans and the peas both go into soups. However, you can rehydrate them and use them in stir fries if you would like. I personally haven't done that yet. I don't know why, but I plan to do that this year, since all I'm going to do this year with my peas, as far as any of them that I decide to preserve, is going to be dehydrating. So when you go to harvest your peas, it's really good that you keep up on it every single day, because if you don't and they start to mature, like these ones are starting to get too mature to eat fresh, I'm not going to add these to salads. In fact, what I'm going to do with these is they're too young to use a seed, but I needed to get them off the plants, because you don't want them to get to that point where they're ready for seed, where they're full, because what's going to happen is your plant's going to turn yellow and it's going to die off, because it's going to say, okay, I'm done reproducing. I don't need to make any more seed. seed, so it's just going to die off, and that's why your peas will turn yellow. So look your plants over thoroughly to find any peas that you may have forgotten on there that are trying to mature, like these ones are just, again, just a little on the too far side. They start to get too tough. So what I do with these is I break them open. The peas on the inside are really small. You can either just eat these, but I like to feed these to the chickens. The chickens really like those. So I've got some video here showing me harvesting the peas. So instead of breaking it off right here under the stem part, which is easier to do, take your fingernail or a pair of snippers and just cut it right above this little part, right above the pea. Then you can break this off after you harvest the pea. You want to get this part off the plant, and I always forget to do this because we tend to, when we're just going through the motions, go through the easiest method. It's not that much harder to go above the stem. It just doesn't break off as easy. But if you're using scissors, just snip it. That's super easy. And then you just break that part off, and then that's going to help give you more peas and keep your plants producing for a longer period of time. Okay, now for cutting them up. So you can either break these little things off like this by hand, and you can see there's some here that I didn't get the tops broke off on, so I'm gonna have to go check. And then I pile them up. I don't care what size they are. I don't worry about it. This one's a little too mature. This one's big, but not very mature. The peas aren't getting fat on the inside. Anyway, you can just stack them up and make sure, it's easier to make sure that all your little tops are taken off before you go to cut these, because otherwise, you're going to have all these different lengths. And I will pick them, some of them really small. The younger they are, the more tender they are. So if you're wanting to use it in salads, you're going to want to use the younger, more tender ones. In stir fry, since you're cooking it a little bit, you can go for a bigger, slightly more tough pea for that. And then how I like to cut them is I just typically go for thirds in this. Sometimes quarters. In this case, I'll go ahead and cut it in quarters. I'll have some little tiny pieces in there. And then if I see any I think are a little too big, I'll just cut those up. And then I just toss them on my tray. So simple as that. No need to blanch or anything like that. This one here is a little big, but since most of these are going to be rehydrated and cooked anyway, I'm not going to worry too much about how tough they are. You just want to really make sure that you cut it up. I find that's best because the older the pea gets, the tougher the string gets on the outside, and then you're going to have to string them if you do that. But if you get them young enough, and if you're going to cook them, just cut it, and then there's no issue with the string, and then cook them up. No big deal. I'm just going to keep cutting them. Check for these tops. You don't really want those in there. They're edible. You just don't really want them in there because they're kind of tough. Just like that. As simple as that. Throw them on your trays. Okay, and then once you got your tray all filled up, you can see these aren't laid out and spread out real thin. I find that snow peas tend to dehydrate up very quickly, and you don't really want to go higher than 120 degrees when you're dehydrating them. It might take the full day. It might take a couple of days. It's going to depend on where you have it. Even if you have your dehydrator set at the same temp, certain places might be more humid, whether it be your climate or certain places that you set it, and so it can cause it to take longer. I find in the greenhouse, if I don't have the fan in the greenhouse going, it takes longer, but if I have the fan that I have running to help circulate the air in the greenhouse for the vegetation that's in there, if I have that running while I'm also dehydrating in the greenhouse, I do that to keep from heating up the house, and also because we have solar outlets out there, then that will help it to dehydrate a lot faster. So it keeps keeps it from getting too humid. But you can see I have them stacked up a little bit. I'm not worried about them. I just toss it on there. I don't individually place it with gaps in between. There's really no need. Same thing when you dehydrate your green beans. So I would say, anywhere from maybe 6 to 12 hours, depending on where you have what temperature you have it on. You may want to go as low as 110 or 115 on these, but again, I say no higher than 120 if you're using plastic. I find that, though I really like the Nesco dehydrators, if you go 125 or higher, even though they're supposed to go higher, and you're wanting, and you leave it on there a little bit too long, it will cause your trays and your screens here to warp. And then it makes me wonder what kind of things are getting leached into the food when I do that. So a lower temp is better. So if you're using stainless steel trays, then I wouldn't worry about it. You could go a little bit higher when you're dehydrating vegetables like this. Herbs, you always want to keep them lower, 115 at the highest for your herbs, and even lower than that is better. 95 to 110 is a pretty good temp for doing herbs. And then once you have your peas, just check them when you feel them fully dry and they make that kind of crunchy sound like I showed you there, then they're ready. Let them cool, and then take the tray off your dehydrator, then let it cool, and then put them in your jar. You don't want to put them in your jars when they're still hot, because what's going to happen, especially you can put them in there, but make sure you let them cool off, at least in the jar. I say keep it on the tray until it's fully cool, then put it in the jar, then vacuum seal it. You don't want to vacuum seal them while they're hot, because you're going to get condensation buildup, and now you're going to have moisture back in your jar again. So then all you have to do is put on your canning lid, and you can either use your food saver, and I always use the food saver attachment, the lids, and you can either use your food saver to do this, or you can use your brake bleeder. I have a video on using both methods, but I'll go ahead and show you the brake bleeder method here, because that's all I use now. I don't, especially since now my food saver has just died on me. And then just insert the tip. You have to hold it in. Now some people have gone the extra step of taking the hose from the food saver that has the special tip that fits into the food saver top, and then just jam the two hoses together, and found that works. If you do it this way, just hold it in there. You don't have to press real hard. Just press it in there gently, and then pump it up to where it's at least 15 psi. I usually go just a little past that to maybe about 17, just to make sure I get a really good seal on my jar. Also make sure that your lid is clean, and the lid itself, the rim of the lid, and the rim of the jar as well. And then you have it nicely sealed, and that should last for a very long time. And like I said, even after opening this, so let's just say you lose your seal, I still put a lid on somewhat tightly. That way, in case it still does lose its seal, because these are fully dehydrated, I have still found my vegetables to stay crunchy, crispy. Certain other things will, like bananas. Bananas are one thing that you want to, if you dehydrate bananas, use them up within a year and make sure they stay good and sealed. But most other dehydrated things, if they lose their seal, it's not that big of a deal. But anyway, just go back and check it, reseal it. It's not like you have to recan it like you would some other stuff. All right, well, I just wanted to let you know that today, the day that I'm shooting this video, is actually July 11th. Our snow peas are very far behind. I'm not sure when I'm going to publish this. I may try to publish it within the next couple of days, but I am assuming that for most people, your snow peas are over and done with, and you're done preserving them and putting them away. So, but in case you're like me and everything's behind, and or you live in a cooler climate anyway, where your snow peas are still giving you abundance, then I'm going to see if I can try to get this video out. I'll have to shift everything over when I do that, so that maybe you can start preserving this for this year. Otherwise, at least you'll have this information for next year when your snow peas start coming in, and just another way that you can preserve your snow pea harvest. I mean, because canning is not a good idea. Freezing is a great option, but I'm finding dehydrating to be the best when it comes to the snow peas. Okay, well, I hope you enjoyed this video and that you learned something new. Thanks for watching. Take care, and God bless.